Okay, what I want to talk about today is the concept of the unmarked category. It's doubtless a term that some of you have heard and doubtless a term some of you have used. I just want to present a way that I approached it in the classroom because it's a powerful idea and it's one that can apply to a lot of different understandings. We can apply it to a lot of texts, a lot of our theories, a lot of the things we talk about in a lot of our classes. But it can be a tricky one for students to wrap their minds around. So I want to talk about how I approach it with my students. The first thing I do is say, okay, how many people in the classroom have ever gone to the bathroom? And eventually all the students raise their hands. Takes some a little while, but there you go. And then I say, okay, what do these symbols mean? And I'll simply draw this on the board. And the students will say, oh, that's men's room, women's room, boys' room, girls' room, restroom. They'll use some terminology to designate, oh, I get it. And I'll say, okay, absolutely correct. You'll see the symbol, you'll see it on a door, you know from the context and all that that's what it means. And then I'll ask, okay, how do you know that this one is women's room? And they'll say, oh, it's wearing a skirt. And I say, oh yeah, obviously, okay, yeah, okay, so now what all does that mean? And we'll discuss a little bit about gender identity and how that's constructed. And I say, okay, and then how do you know that this one's male? And they'll go, because it's not wearing a skirt. And that usually causes a little bit of a pause. Somebody will doubtless make some sort of joke about me drawing a phallus on the thing or something like that, which is, fair enough, it's the classroom. But what they get to relatively quickly is that there's nothing that marks this as male. What this is marked as is human. That is a representation of a human being. This is a representation of a human being that we assign femaleness to because we have identified it as female. We don't identify this one as male. That's because maleness is the unmarked category. An unmarked category is a category that gets to be the default setting. It doesn't need to be designated because it's assumed based on other criteria. In this case, the criterion is being a human being. And the automatic setting for being a human being is maleness. You then need to designate if it is something other than that default category. How do you designate that in this situation? You draw a skirt. So students begin to understand markedness and unmarkedness as being creators of identity. And markedness and unmarkedness by itself probably isn't all that big a deal, but it gets used to do things like describe a suspect. Well, it was a black male about age 20 as opposed to a male about age 20. If we want to discuss this in terms of identity categories, let's take this example. If you have a traditional heterosexual marriage, you have a man and a woman getting married to one another. The man's title doesn't change in that process. Why? Because maleness and marriedness for maleness are both unmarked. Femaleness needs marked, and married status needs marked for women. So a woman's title changes from Miss to Mrs. Women more traditionally wear rings, whatever hand one wears a wedding ring on. We mark these categories, and that shapes, that at the very least is correlative and is probably causative of a lot of power that gets exerted over some categories and not over others. Any category that is non-dominant is often, I don't want to say always, but very, very often marked. Dominant categories don't need to be marked. The hegemon is not marked. I know I inhabit every hegemonic category you could care to think of. I am white, I am male, I am straight, I am etc., etc. So I'm educated. Therefore, I don't have to be marked. Marking is not an automatic creator of power, but it's the thing that opens the door onto power and the exertion of power. In a case like this, there's an implicit understanding that a woman's body is marked and that a man's body doesn't need to be. This idea of marking and unmarking, it is a really powerful way to begin to understand how identity gets constructed, by whom and at whom. And I think that's really, really useful for a lot of our classes.